The sun was high over the valley, its golden rays cutting through the crisp mountain air. Daniel Hayes's truck rumbled along the gravel road, dust swirling behind him like a tail of smoke. For years, he had dreamed of this moment, the day he would return to his family's mountain cabin, the place that had defined his childhood, his youth, his very sense of belonging. But as he rounded the last bend, his heart sank. A barricade stood where the open road once led straight to his family's land. Steel fencing blocked the path, topped with bright orange mesh. Beyond it, freshly paved roads gleamed unnaturally, and rows of shiny houses he had never seen before sat like squat invaders against the valley's wild beauty. His valley, his home. Daniel hit the brakes, his truck jerking to a stop. He stepped out slowly, boots crunching on gravel. His eyes narrowed at the bold white letters on the metal sign bolted to the barricade, private property, HOA access only. His pulse thundered in his ears. HOA, he muttered, his voice sharp with disbelief. Since when does an HOA own my father's land? The crunch of footsteps cut through his thoughts. He turned. A woman in a bright purple suit stormed toward him, clipboard tucked under one arm, sunglasses flashing in the sun. Her stride was sharp, her chin high. Daniel didn't need an introduction. This was her, the self-appointed queen of the valley, the HOA tyrant he'd heard whispers about but never truly believed existed. Her voice was shrill, commanding, echoing off the mountain walls. You can't be here. This is private HOA property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Daniel let out a sharp laugh, though his fists clenched at his sides. Trespassers, lady, I grew up here. That cabin on the ridge. My father built it with his own hands. You're the one trespassing. Before she could respond, sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights pierced the sunlight, reflecting against the barricade. A police cruiser pulled up, tires spitting gravel. Two officers stepped out, hands already resting on their belts. The HOA queen's lips curled into a satisfied smile. She pointed at Daniel like a prosecutor delivering her verdict. There, that's the squatter I told you about. He refuses to leave. Daniel's jaw tightened. He raised his hands slightly, palms open, voice strong but calm. Officers, I think there's been a mistake. My name is Daniel Hayes. This valley, this cabin, it's mine. My family has the deed. You can pull the county records right now. But the HOA queen cut in, her voice venomous. Don't fall for his lies. He's been gone for years, abandoned it. We took control lawfully. He's dangerous. Arrest him before he causes trouble. The lead officer stepped forward, flashlight in hand, though. It was broad daylight. He shined it across Daniel's face like an interrogation lamp. Sir, I'm going to need you to step back from the barricade. Identify yourself now. Daniel's blood boiled. His eyes flicked from the officer's cold stare to the smug satisfaction on Karen's face. Every muscle in his body screamed to fight, to push through, to tear down that steel fence with his bare hands. But he forced his voice to remain steady. My name is Daniel Hayes. Hayes, this land was my grandfather's, my father's, and now it's mine. I have every right to walk through that gate. Karen's laughter rang out, harsh and mocking. Oh, please. Those old records mean nothing now. The HOA owns everything in this valley. He's just a bitter man clinging to the past. Daniel took a step forward, fury igniting in his chest. Instantly, one officer shoved a firm hand against his chest. Back off. Do not escalate this situation. His voice exploded, rage tearing through years of silence. She's lying. This is my land, that cabin up there. That's my family's legacy. You can arrest me, you can throw your signs and your fences in my face, but I am not leaving. Phones rose in the background. Neighbors gathered, whispering, recording. The scene had become a spectacle, a battlefield staged under the afternoon sun. The officers exchanged a tense glance, hands tightening near their cuffs. Karen leaned in close, her voice dripping with arrogance. You'll never set foot in that cabin again, not while I run this valley. The words struck him like a blade, his fists clenched tighter, his boots dug into the gravel. The valley seemed to roar with him as his voice thundered for all to hear. You don't own this land. You'll never own this land, not while I'm alive. The first spark had ignited, and everyone watching knew. This was only the beginning. The air felt heavy, as though the mountain itself was holding its breath. The flashing police lights painted streaks of red and blue across the barricade, across Daniel's face, across the valley that once felt like home. Daniel stood tall, boots planted, refusing to back down. The officers tried to corral him away from the steel gate, but he didn't move. His body was rigid, defiant, fueled by the fire of generations that had bled into this soil. Karen's shrill voice cut through the noise like broken glass. "Officers, I want him removed immediately. He's trespassing, threatening me, and causing a public disturbance. Do your job." The lead officer, a broad man with mirrored sunglasses, raised a hand. "Ma'am, step back. Let us handle this." But Karen wouldn't be silenced. She jabbed her manicured finger in Daniel's direction, her purple suit glowing like a warning flare in the afternoon sun. "He doesn't belong here. This is our community now. Arrest him before he causes real damage." Daniel's voice, steady but edged with fury, broke through. "You think a clipboard gives you the right to erase decades of history? You think new pavement and fences can erase bloodlines? This land remembers who it belongs to, and it's not you." The crowd murmured. Phones captured every second. Neighbors whispered, some siding with Karen, others nodding at Daniel's raw conviction. The second officer, younger and visibly tense, approached cautiously. "Sir, listen, we don't want this to get ugly. If you've got paperwork, deeds, anything, take it to the courthouse. Don't make us take you in." Daniel's laugh was short, bitter. "Paperwork? You think I came here empty-handed?" He slapped the glove box of his truck, yanked it open, and pulled out a weathered leather folder. Dust drifted in the sunlight as he held it high. "Right here, my father's deed, county seal, signed, notarized, untouched for 50 years. You want proof, here it is." The younger officer leaned in, squinting at the faded ink, his brow furrowed. "Looks legitimate." Karen lunged forward, snatching at the papers with claws disguised as manicured nails. "That means nothing. Outdated documents don't hold up. The HOA has jurisdiction now." But before her hand could touch the deed, Daniel snapped his wrist back. "Touch this, and you'll regret it." His voice was low, guttural, dangerous. The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed in. The atmosphere thickened, as if the valley itself was waiting to see who would break first. Karen shrieked, turning to the officers. "Did you hear that? He threatened me. Arrest him now." The lead officer's jaw clenched. His hand slid down toward his cuffs. "Sir, last warning. Step back. Don't escalate this." Daniel's chest rose and fell, anger surging like a storm. But instead of stepping back, he stepped forward, boots grinding against the gravel, eyes locked on Karen like steel on steel. "You came into my valley. You paved over my trails. You put up fences where children used to play. And now you're telling me to walk away. No, not today. Not ever." The officer shoved his hand against Daniel's shoulder, but Daniel didn't budge. The clash of wills was electric. Neighbors leaned in. The crowd had doubled now, drawn by the sirens and shouting. It was no longer just a dispute. It was a public spectacle. Karen's voice climbed into a shriek. "Do you see this madness? This is exactly why we needed control. People like him, violent, unstable." Her words were cut short by Daniel's roar. "People like me built this land. You've done nothing but poison it with greed and fences. My father bled here. My grandfather carved his life into these hills. And you." His voice cracked with rage, finger stabbing toward Karen. "You think you can erase us with rules and fees? You're standing on my family's bones." The silence after his outburst was deafening. Even the birds seemed to pause mid-flight. Karen staggered back, for the first time losing a sliver of her composure. But her pride wouldn't let her falter for long. She spun toward the officers, trembling with fury. "Take him down, right now. If you don't, I'll have your badges at the next town meeting." The officers hesitated. The weight of the crowd pressed in. Cameras were everywhere. Any wrong move would be broadcast to the world within minutes. Daniel, sensing the moment, lifted the deed high above his head. His voice boomed across the valley, resonating with the spirit of generations past. This land doesn't belong to your HOA. It belongs to the Hayes family, and I swear I'll fight every fence, every lie, and every corrupt law you throw at me until I take it back." The crowd erupted. Some cheered, others shouted, but all eyes burned with energy. The valley had become an arena, Daniel its warrior. The officers froze, caught between orders and public scrutiny, and Karen, her face red with rage, jabbed her finger one last time, her voice cracking as she screamed, "You'll regret this day, Hayes. Mark my words. You'll regret it." The battle lines had been drawn, and for Daniel, there was no turning back. The sun beat down mercilessly on the valley, every shadow sharp, every color burning bright. What began as a private dispute had now exploded into a spectacle. Neighbors lined the road, phones out, documenting every second. Red and blue lights still pulsed from the cruisers parked across the gravel, but now they felt less like protection and more like theater lights on a stage. Daniel stood at the center of it all, sweat streaking down his temple, jaw locked, fists clenched. The deed folder was still clutched in his hand, its leather worn but indestructible like the history it carried. Across from him, Karen was a storm in a purple suit. Her makeup ran slightly in the heat, but her rage was untouched. She paced in front of the officers like a general rallying her troops, her finger never leaving Daniel. "He's dangerous," she barked, her voice hoarse from shouting. "You're all witnesses. He threatened me, he lunged at me. This man is violent. He doesn't belong in a civilized community. Arrest him before he hurts someone." The crowd buzzed, half in agreement, half in defiance. A young man shouted from the back, "We've known him since we were kids. He's no threat." Another voice cut in, "Karen runs this place like a dictatorship." Phones zoomed closer. The story was spreading. Every shout, every glare recorded, shared, amplified. The lead officer, sweat dripping beneath his cap, tried to steady his voice. "All right, enough. Everyone back up. We're not turning this into a circus." But it was too late. The circus was already alive. Daniel's voice sliced through the chaos, raw and commanding. "You want to talk about civilized, Karen? Civilized is respecting what was here before you ever came. Civilized is honoring the hands that built this valley. My family cut those trees, laid those beams, lived through winters here when nobody else would. And now you march in with fences and bylaws? Trying to erase us, that's not civilized, it's theft." Karen gasped dramatically, clutching her chest as though his words were daggers. "Theatrics, lies, don't let him manipulate you with his sob story." Daniel took a step forward, the sun flaring in his eyes. His voice grew louder, sharper. "This isn't a sob story. It's truth, and truth doesn't disappear just because you write it out of your HOA minutes." The younger officer stepped between them, palms out. "Hayes, I need you to calm down. You're making this harder for yourself." Daniel's teeth ground together. "Harder? They already broke into my valley, cut my trails, poisoned my soil with their asphalt. What more can they take?" The officer lowered his voice, almost pleading. "If you resist us, they'll spin this against you. Don't give them the footage they want." But Karen had already turned the scene into her weapon. She waved her arms at the crowd, raising her voice so every phone could catch it. "You see, he admits it. He's unstable, paranoid, aggressive. This is exactly why the HOA has to protect this valley. People like him can't be trusted with land. They'll destroy it." Daniel's eyes blazed. He lifted the deed again, the paper fluttering in the dry breeze. "You want to talk about destruction? Look at the trees you bulldozed for your fake park. Look at the creek you rerouted to water your lawns. You destroyed the valley because you saw profit where we saw family. And you call me unstable." The crowd shifted. More murmurs, more whispers. Some phones now pointed at Karen. Karen's face reddened, her voice cracking as she screamed, "Shut him down. Take him away. Do your job." The lead officer stepped forward, steel cuffs glinting in his hand. "Hayes, this is your last chance. Stand down or we'll have no choice." Daniel's chest rose and fell like a war drum. He could feel his father's ghost standing beside him, whispering, "Don't let them take it." Not again. He straightened his shoulders, eyes locked on the officer. His voice rang like thunder. "Then do it. Cuff me in front of the whole valley. Show them what justice looks like when greed runs the show. But know this. He jabbed a finger toward Karen. This fight doesn't end tonight. This valley will remember who stood for it, and it won't be her. The crowd erupted, cheers mixing with gasps, voices clashing like swords. Karen screamed over the noise, her voice cracking, desperate. Arrest him, now, before he destroys everything. The officers closed in. One grabbed Daniel's wrist, another his shoulder. The crowd surged, people shouting at the cops to stop, others yelling to take him away. Phones captured it all. Daniel's defiance, Karen's rage, the law's hesitation. In the chaos, Daniel roared, his voice echoing off the mountains, "You can chain me, but you'll never chain the valley." The words thundered across the land, impossible to ignore, impossible to forget. And as the officers wrestled him toward the cruiser, the battle for the valley had ignited into something far greater than property lines. It was now a war of truth versus power. The handcuffs bit into Daniel's wrists with cold finality, steel clinking louder than the crowd's shouting. His boots scraped against the gravel as two officers dragged him toward the cruiser, their grips firm, their expressions strained under the weight of the moment. The sun was merciless, blazing down on the scene, highlighting every detail. Karen's triumphant smirk, the crimson anger on Daniel's face, the flashing police lights painting chaos across the valley road. Karen strutted forward, her heels clacking like a victory drumbeat. She leaned toward Daniel as the officers shoved him against the hood of the cruiser. "See," she hissed, her voice sharp as glass. "You thought you could stand against me, against the HOA, but you're nothing. You'll rot in a cell while we build something greater here." Daniel turned his head, his face inches from hers. Even with cuffs digging into his skin, his eyes burned like wildfire. "You'll never own this valley. You can cut me down, but the roots run deeper than you'll ever see." Karen scoffed, tossing her hair back, but for the first time there was a flicker in her eyes, an unease she couldn't hide. The officers shoved him into the back of the cruiser, the door slamming shut like a gavel. The crowd erupted, half shouting in outrage, half jeering in support of the HOA queen. "Free him," someone yelled. "Lock him up," another shouted. Phones rose higher, capturing every second, broadcasting Daniel's arrest to anyone who would watch. The valley wasn't just a battlefield now, it was a viral story. The younger officer slid into the driver's seat, eyes flicking nervously to the rearview mirror. He muttered, "This doesn't feel right." But the lead officer barked, "Orders are orders." He resisted. End of story. Karen, standing in the glow of attention, raised her arms like a preacher at a sermon. "Let this be a warning," she cried to the crowd. "The HOA exists to protect, to enforce order. We will not tolerate trespassers, threats, or instability. The valley is safe because we are in control." Booing erupted from one corner of the crowd. Cheers from another. The lines were drawn deeper. Inside the cruiser, Daniel leaned back against the seat, his breathing heavy. His reflection glared back at him from the reinforced glass. He whispered under his breath, almost like a vow, "This isn't the end. This is just the beginning." The car rolled forward, gravel crunching under its tires. The crowd parted, phones tracking the cruiser until it vanished down the mountain road. Police station, 2 hours later, the holding cell smelled of sweat and iron. The clang of the barred door echoed as Daniel was shoved inside. He sat on the bench, wrists raw, his mind racing with fury and strategy. A reporter's voice drifted in from the front desk, muffled but clear enough. "Is it true the man claims to own the valley? Is the HOA pressing charges? What about the viral footage?" Daniel smirked despite himself. The story was out. He didn't need to shout anymore. The world would shout for him. An officer appeared at the bars, arms crossed, lawyers on his way. "You've stirred up quite the storm, Hayes. Half the county's talking about you." Daniel met his gaze, unflinching. "Good. The truth doesn't stay buried forever." Back at the valley, Karen stood on the porch of the clubhouse, basking in the attention of cameras. Microphones shoved toward her, neighbors circling like moths around fire. She adjusted her suit, lips curling into a performance. Ready smile. This valley deserves peace. This man, Daniel Hayes, is a threat to that peace. We've taken necessary action, and we will continue to enforce the rules that keep this community safe." But even as she spoke, shouts broke out in the crowd. A group of younger neighbors held up hand, painted signs. "This is Hayes' land. HOA is the real threat." Karen's face tightened. For a moment, the cracks in her armor showed. But she forced her voice louder, fiercer. "The HOA is law here, and no outlaw will ever take that away." Her words echoed across the valley, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The crowd wasn't united anymore. The HOA grip was slipping, and she knew it. Back in the cell, Daniel sat alone, staring at the cracks in the wall. His wrists throbbed, but his resolve hardened. He thought of his father, his grandfather, the bloodlines that tied him to this valley. Karen could have her rules, her officers, her fences, but Daniel had history, he had truth, and now he had the eyes of the world, his jaw set. His whisper filled the silence. "I'll take back the valley, no matter the cost." The storm had only begun. Back at the valley, the sun was beating down on the wide stretch of Daniel's valley. Dust rose in thin spirals as police SUV lined the dirt road, their sirens fading into the summer heat. Officers were everywhere, cordoning off the cabin, scanning the property, writing in notepads. The once quiet retreat had turned into a war zone of authority and accusation. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, stood on the porch with her purple dress glowing under the daylight. Her face was flushed with rage and fake confidence. Behind her, neighbors whispered nervously, recording on their phones as if they were about to witness the climax of a movie. Daniel walked slowly up the gravel path, his boots crunching under the weight of the moment. He was handcuffed, flanked by 2 officers. His shirt was torn from the earlier scuffle, but his eyes burned with the fire of a man who had been pushed too far. Karen raised her chin, arms crossed, pretending to command the scene. Karen smirking, "You thought you could just walk back into this valley, Daniel. You thought you could defy us. This land belongs to the association now, and soon the entire town will know it." Daniel gritting his teeth. "This land belonged to my family long before you even knew what a valley was. And you don't own a single stone here." The officers pushed him forward, but Daniel stopped, planting his boots firmly into the dirt. The whole crowd seemed to hold its breath. He turned his head slowly toward Karen, Daniel's voice sharp as steel. "The law doesn't bend to HOA, and when the truth comes out, you'll wish you never set foot on my valley." Karen snapped her fingers at the nearest officer, her voice rising like a spoiled child demanding more toys. "Karen, get him out of here. He's trespassing. He's violent. He's dangerous. Do your job." But before the officers could move him, another police vehicle pulled up, dust exploding behind its tires. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped Captain Harris, the regional commander. His uniform was crisp, his presence heavier than the mountain air. "Captain Harris, hold it right there." Everyone froze. Even the officers at Daniel's side straightened immediately. Karen blinked, her mouth hanging open. Captain Harris walked straight to Daniel, scanning him quickly before turning his piercing gaze on Karen. "Captain Harris, I've reviewed the deeds, I've reviewed the calls, and I've reviewed the lab reports from the poisoned lake." A murmur rippled through the crowd, phones lifted higher. Karen's confident mask cracked for a second, but she quickly tried to rebuild it. "Karen, Captain, I don't think you understand. This man is a threat. He attacked us. Captain Harris cut her off with a raised hand. "Captain Harris, enough. I've dealt with bigger threats than property disputes, Mrs. Karen. What I see here is a man defending his rightful land and an HOA acting outside its authority." The words hit like thunder. The neighbors gasped. Daniel's jaw tightened, his breath slow but steady. Karen's face turned crimson. Karen shrieking, "This is my valley now, you don't get it. The runway is already approved. Planes will land here, investors will come. This place will change forever. Because I made it happen." Daniel took one step forward, the cuffs clinking as he leaned into her rage. Daniel low, dangerous voice, "You poisoned my lake. You brought chaos to my home. And now you want to pave over my family's history with your runway. Not while I'm alive." The crowd erupted into noise, some siding with Karen, others shouting support for Daniel. Police tried to push everyone back, but the chaos was impossible to contain. Karen lunged forward, pointing a trembling finger directly at Daniel, her voice breaking with madness. "Karen, arrest him, right now. He's a criminal, a liar, eh?" But Captain Harris's voice cut through like a blade. "Captain Harris, stand down, Karen. This valley isn't yours. And if I find one shred of evidence that you tampered with that lake water..." He leaned closer, his tone lethal. "You won't just lose this valley, you'll lose your freedom." The tension snapped like a bowstring. Karen staggered back, her face pale, her purple dress glowing like a false crown in the daylight. Daniel stood tall, handcuffed but undefeated, the weight of the valley at his back. The fight wasn't over, but the balance had shifted. For the first time, the HOA queen looked less like a ruler and more like a cornered pretender. Back in the patrol car, Daniel's mind was already racing. The valley wasn't just land. It was a battlefield now, and the next round was coming fast. Back at the station, the sun had barely shifted when Daniel was hauled into the sheriff's station. His boots scraped against the linoleum floor, the cuffs still biting his wrists. The room smelled of burnt coffee and paper dust. Officers moved around briskly, phones ringing, files shuffling, tension humming like an electric current. Karen stormed in right behind him, her purple dress now wrinkled, her hair frazzled from shouting. But her arrogance hadn't dimmed. She slapped a thick folder onto the sheriff's desk, her nails clicking against the wood. Karen snarling, "There. Proof. Every violation, every trespass. He's been living off the grid illegally. He's been building structures without permits. He even threatened me in front of dozens of witnesses." Daniel lifted his head, eyes burning with a quiet defiance. "Daniel, what she calls trespassing is me walking on my own soil. What she calls illegal structures are the cabins my father built with his bare hands." The sheriff, a heavy-set man with gray streaks in his mustache, rubbed his temples. He looked tired, caught in the crossfire of small town politics and HOA tyranny. "Sheriff, Karen, this valley feud is spiraling out of control." And Daniel, he glanced at the cuffs. "Your arrest wasn't by my orders. It came from higher up." The room fell silent. Karen blinked, confused, while Daniel tilted his head. "Daniel, higher up, who?" Before the sheriff could answer, the station door burst open. A group of men in dark suits marched in, their badges flashing in the fluorescent light. At their head was a tall, cold-eyed man who carried authority like a weapon. Agent Miller's stern voice. "Daniel Cooper, we need to talk, alone." Karen's face twisted, her control slipping. "Karen, wait. What's going on? This is HOA jurisdiction. This is our case." Agent Miller turned to her with a glare that could cut steel. "Agent Miller, ma'am, poisoning lakes, tampering with land deeds, and constructing unauthorized airstrips without federal clearance isn't HOA jurisdiction, it's federal crime." The room gasped. Even the sheriff leaned back, stunned. Karen's lips trembled as she tried to form words but failed. Daniel, still cuffed, let out the faintest smirk. Daniel, finally, someone who actually knows the law. The agents moved him into an interrogation room. Karen tried to follow, but Miller's men blocked her path. "Agent Miller, not you. Sit down." Inside the small gray room, Daniel sat opposite Miller. The cuffs were finally removed, but his wrists bore red marks. Miller slid a thin file across the table. Inside were aerial photographs of the valley, the poisoned lake, the half-built runway, the cabins. "Agent Miller, tell me exactly what's going on out there." Daniel leaned forward, his voice low, raw with urgency. "Daniel, Karen's HOA isn't just about lawns and fences. They poisoned the water to force families out. They bribed county officials to get approval for a private runway. And when I returned, they tried to erase me. But I've got documents, my father's deeds, witnesses. This land is mine, and the operation is criminal." Miller studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Agent Miller, we've been tracking irregularities in your county for months. Money laundering, land grabs, illegal construction tied to outside investors. What you've said lines up." Daniel clenched his fists. Daniel, then let me help you stop them. Because if that runway is finished, this valley will be lost forever. Meanwhile, in the main lobby, Karen was unraveling. She paced like a caged predator, her voice shrill. Karen, you can't do this. You don't know who I know. That land is ours. It was promised to us. Neighbors who had followed to the station whispered and filmed her meltdown. Her once commanding presence had crumbled into desperation. The sheriff muttered under his breath, shaking his head. Sheriff, she's finished. Back inside, Miller slid a recorder across the table to Daniel. Agent Miller, this isn't just about your valley anymore. This is bigger. I'm authorizing you as a cooperating witness, but it won't be easy. You'll be back in that valley, surrounded by the same people who want you gone. Can you handle that? Daniel leaned forward, eyes like fire. Daniel, handle it. I was born in that valley. They'll have to bury me before I let them take it. Miller gave a grim nod. Agent Miller, then it's settled. You're not just fighting for your valley anymore. You're fighting to bring the whole operation down. Back outside the station, Karen's screams echoed into the daylight, but no one listened anymore. The queen of the HOA was losing her crown, and Daniel was just beginning his war. Back at the valley looked different when Daniel returned that afternoon. The sun was blazing high, its light bouncing off the poisoned lake, the cabins, and the unfinished strip of land where Karen's so-called runway was being carved. Trucks idled near the site, men in hard hats moving like ants under the HOA orders. The once quiet mountain air was now filled with the grind of machinery, but Daniel didn't walk in alone. At his side were two deputies, their cruisers parked behind him. Miller's black SUV trailed farther back, agents inside watching silently, letting Daniel take the first step. Neighbors had gathered by the roadside, whispers turning into gasps. For the first time, someone had returned to face Karen not with fear, but with law and fire at his back. Karen stood near the construction site, her purple suit a beacon of arrogance. She was flanked by her loyal board members, each clutching binders and clipboards like weapons. Her lips curled when she saw Daniel. Karen, so you're back, with police this time. You think uniforms scare me? Daniel took a slow step forward, his boots crunching gravel. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. Daniel, I'm not here to scare you, Karen. I'm here to end you. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Cameras came out, phones recording every second. Karen's eyes narrowed. Karen, this is private property. You're trespassing. Again, officers arrest him. One of the deputies stepped forward, holding up a hand. Deputy, not this time, ma'am. He owns this land. We've seen the deeds. We've seen the lab results. Poisoning a lake, that's a felony. Karen's face went pale, then flushed crimson. She jabbed her finger toward Daniel. Karen, he's lying. He forged those papers. He staged those tests. He's nothing but a criminal squatter. Daniel snapped back, voice thunderous. Daniel, my father carved this valley out of wilderness. My family bled for this land, and you tried to steal it with poison and lies, but your time is up. The construction workers hesitated, unsure whether to keep going. Some stepped back, throwing off their helmets, realizing they were pawns in something bigger. Karen shrieked at them. Karen, keep building. Finish the runway. Don't you dare stop. Daniel stormed forward, yanking the tarp off a stack of barrels hidden by the site. Bright warning labels screamed across them. Toxic waste, hazardous materials. The crowd gasped, neighbors recoiling. Cameras zoomed in. Daniel, these were buried under your runway, weren't they? You poisoned the lake to get us out, and now you're burying poison under our homes. The deputies moved in, radios crackling. Miller's SUV door swung open, federal agents stepping out with cameras of their own. Karen's face twisted into desperation. She lunged toward Daniel, her finger stabbing the air like a dagger. Karen, you don't belong here. This is my valley now. Daniel stood tall, unflinching, as she came inches from his chest. His voice was calm, deadly. Daniel, no. This was never yours, and today, everyone sees it. Karen slapped his shoulder in a frenzy, but deputies grabbed her arms. She thrashed like a wild animal, screaming curses that echoed against the mountains. Neighbors filmed, some shouting back at her. Neighbor 1, you poisoned our water. Neighbor 2, you nearly killed our kids. Neighbor 3, you don't speak for us anymore. Karen's board members tried to slip away, but federal agents stopped them, taking their files and phones as evidence. The sheriff's cruiser rolled up the dirt road, sirens wailing, dust clouding the air. The sheriff himself stepped out, his expression stone. Sheriff, Karen, you're done. Step aside. For the first time, Karen's confidence cracked fully. Her screams faltered, her eyes darted around for someone, anyone to defend her. But the neighbors she once controlled now stared with contempt, some even cheering as deputies pulled her away. Daniel lifted one of the toxic barrels high enough for the cameras to capture the warning label. Daniel, this is what she tried to bury under our valley, not just poison in our water, but poison in our future, and she would have gotten away with it if we had stayed silent. The crowd roared, anger and relief mixing like fire and thunder. Karen, dragged toward the cruiser, spat over her shoulder. Karen, this isn't over. You'll regret this, Daniel. All of you will regret this. But her words rang hollow. The sheriff shut the cruiser door, silencing her. The car pulled away, Karen's face vanishing behind tinted glass. Silence washed over the valley for a moment, broken only by the buzz of agents photographing evidence. Then, slowly, neighbors gathered around Daniel. They didn't speak at first. They just stood, their presence saying what words could not. He had done what they couldn't. He had faced the monster and won. Daniel lowered the barrel and looked across the land his father had built, his voice rough but steady. Daniel, this valley belongs to us again, and for the first time in years the valley breathed. Later that evening, as the valley settled under a burning orange sunset, the poisoned lake shimmered like a scar under the fading light. Police tape fluttered in the breeze around the construction site. Federal agents cataloged every barrel, every hose, every fraudulent deed pulled from Karen's files. The hum of aerators churned the water, beginning the slow work of cleansing years of corruption. Neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder on the ridge above the dock, their faces lit with relief, anger, and disbelief all at once. Children clutched their parents' hands. Old men shook their heads, whispering about the valley's better days. For the first time, everyone was united, not under Karen's iron grip, but under a shared truth. Daniel stood at the center, his flannel shirt torn, dirt smeared across his arms, but his posture tall, unbroken. Miller approached, his coat dusted with gravel, a folder in hand. Agent Miller, we've got enough evidence to bury her HOA empire. Illegal dumping, land fraud, corruption. She won't be running anything again. You helped us crack this wide open. Daniel's jaw clenched, his voice steady. Daniel, I didn't do it for me. I did it for this valley. For the people who thought they had no choice but to obey her. Miller nodded, sliding the folder into a deputy's hands. Agent Miller, justice moves slow, but when it comes, it's heavy. She'll feel every pound of it. Across the road, Karen was being transferred from the sheriff's cruiser into a black federal van. Her wrists bound, her once pristine purple suit now wrinkled and stained. She looked nothing like the queen she believed herself to be. She screamed, her voice hoarse. Karen, this valley is mine. Do you hear me? Mine. You can't take it from me. Daniel turned, his voice cutting through the air like steel. Daniel, it was never yours. It belonged to the land, to the people, to every soul who lived here before you ever signed a paper. Her eyes locked with his, and for the first time, fear flickered behind her rage. Then the van door slammed, sealing her fate. The neighbors erupted in cheers. Some clapped Daniel on the back, others hugged him, tears streaming down their faces. A boy tugged at his sleeve, holding up a dead fish wrapped in a plastic bag. Boy, will the lake get better now? Daniel knelt, his weathered hands resting on the boy's shoulders. Daniel, it will, not overnight, but every wound heals if you fight for it, and we're going to fight together. The boy nodded, eyes shining, hope reborn. The sheriff approached, his hat in his hands. Sheriff, son, I owe you an apology. I should have stood up sooner, but you did what none of us had the courage to do. You reminded us what this valley means. Daniel's voice was rough, but strong. Daniel, it means family, it means legacy, it means no one, not a corporation, not an HOA queen, gets to take it away. The sheriff extended his hand. Daniel took it firmly, the crowd watching in silence. It wasn't just a handshake, it was a promise. Suddenly, the sky rumbled with the distant roar of engines. Everyone turned toward the unfinished runway. Two small planes circled overhead. Pilots, confused to find their landing strip swarmed with flashing lights and police vehicles. Agents signaled them off, radios crackling with orders. Miller smirked. Agent Miller, looks like her investors just found out their deal's dead. Daniel's lips curved in the faintest smile. Daniel, good, let them circle. This valley isn't for sale. As night fell, the crowd began to disperse. Families headed home, voices lighter, hope carrying them through the dusk. But Daniel remained at the dock, staring at the poisoned water, slowly churning clean. The aerators bubbled like the valley itself was breathing again. Miller joined him one last time. Agent Miller, so what's next for you? Daniel's gaze never left the lake. Daniel, I rebuild, the cabins, the trust, the lake. This valley is mine to protect, and I won't stop until it's whole again. The camera of a neighbor's phone zoomed in as Daniel lifted his old fishing rod, planting it firmly into the ground like a flag. Daniel, Karen tried to poison it, tried to own it, tried to erase it, but this valley doesn't bow to greed, not now, not ever. And as the stars emerged above the mountains, one truth was carved into stone. The valley had a guardian again, and his fight had only just begun. The valley had become a war zone. Sirens echoed through the mountain roads as two convoys of police cars screamed into the clearing. On one side stood the HOA loyalist, Karen at the front, her arms waving like a general commanding an army. Behind her, a dozen angry faces with picket signs, cameras, and a false sense of power. On the other side, you standing tall on the cabin porch, a weathered leather jacket on your shoulders, the federal badge of the FAA gleaming in your hand. Officers, Karen shouted, her voice cracking with rage. Arrest this trespasser immediately. He's on our land, he's threatening our community. The sheriff raised a hand, confused. Ma'am, this is federal jurisdiction. We already checked the records. You don't understand? Karen snapped, cutting him off. This is my valley now. My rules. He can't just waltz back in after years and claim authority. He's a nobody. That was your cue. You stepped down from the porch, boots crunching against the gravel, your voice carrying across the valley like thunder. Nobody, you said, holding up your FAA credentials. You're standing on federal property, trespassing on my ancestral land, and trying to intimidate the director of the Federal Aviation Administration. Nobody, Karen. I am the law here. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The HOA smug confidence wavered. Karen's face twisted, her voice rising into a scream. Lies, all of it lies. He forged that badge. He staged those documents. Don't believe him. She turned to the police. Cuff him, now. But before the officers could move, two black SUV rolled into the valley. Doors slammed, and out stepped a team of federal marshals, their vests marked with bold letters, U.S. Federal Aviation Authority Enforcement Division. The leader, a tall agent with mirrored sunglasses, strode toward you. Director, we got your call. Backup's here. We'll take it from here. Karen froze, her eyes wide. Director, no, this isn't possible. This can't be happening. Her supporters faltered, their courage draining away. But Karen wasn't finished. She shoved past the police barricade, pointing a shaking finger at you. You think you can come back here and erase us. You think your title makes you untouchable. This is my kingdom now. Adrenaline surged through your veins. Then step into the fire, Karen. Let's end this today. What followed was chaos. Karen lunged forward, shoving an officer aside, and her followers erupted. Shouts, fists, and scuffles broke out as police tried to contain the mob. One man swung a crowbar at a federal marshal. Another hurled rocks at the cabin windows. The valley roared with violence. You ducked a wild punch, countered with a solid strike, and shoved the attacker to the ground. A second rushed you, but you grabbed him by the jacket. twisting his arm behind his back before tossing him toward a deputy. Karen herself charged like a storm, her nails clawing, her voice screeching. "You don't belong here. You'll never belong here." You caught her wrists mid-swipe, forcing her to face you eye to eye. "This was my family's land long before you knew its name, and it'll remain mine long after you're gone." Behind you, the agents secured the scene, handcuffing the violent HOA members. Police cars lit the valley in flashing red and blue. Karen thrashed wildly, but her strength was gone, her empire crumbling in real time. Her final scream echoed into the mountains as two marshals restrained her. "This isn't over. Do you hear me? This isn't over." But deep down, everyone knew it was. The battle was done. The truth had prevailed. And the valley was yours again? Morning sunlight broke through the clouds the next day, casting golden light over the valley. The chaos of the night before had given way to silence, the kind only mountains can keep. The cabin stood tall, its wooden beams scarred but proud, like you. A convoy of federal vehicles lined the dirt road. Inside the cabin, stacks of official documents lay on the table: land deeds, FAA certifications, and federal maps marking the valley as restricted airspace, property of the U.S. government. The sheriff walked in, hat in hand, shaking his head. "I'll be honest, son. I thought you were just some drifter coming back to stir up trouble, but last night you proved otherwise." You nodded, sliding a file across the table. Karen tried to build an empire on stolen ground. She bullied, threatened, and lied her way into power. But legacies aren't built on lies. They're built on truth, law, and blood. Outside, Karen sat in the back of a police cruiser, her head bowed. The once feared queen of the HOA now looked small, powerless, forgotten. Her reign had ended not with triumph, but with handcuffs. One of the federal agents stepped forward. "Director, all records are clear. You own the cabin, the valley, and all air rights above it. This land is officially secured. No one touches it without your permission." You stepped outside, the mountain wind brushing your face. The valley stretched wide before you, green forests, winding rivers, peaks capped with snow. It was more than land. It was history. It was family. It was destiny. And now, it was safe. You took a deep breath, your voice steady, carrying into the wind. "My father built this cabin with his hands. My family bled for this valley, and I'll protect it with everything I am. No HOA, no Karen, no thief will ever take it from me again." The camera of the moment shifted, almost cinematic. Federal agents saluting, the sheriff tipping his hat, the police cars pulling away with Karen screaming in the back seat. The sound of engines faded, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the cry of an eagle soaring overhead. You walked back up the porch steps, placing your hand against the cabin door. It was more than wood and stone. It was your fortress. The final words slipped from your mouth, sharp as a blade, final as a gavel. "This valley is mine, always was, always will be." Fade to black.